Okay, here we go. We're going to talk about rounding, and in order to talk about rounding, we're going to talk about pi. Pi is equal to approximately 3.1415926, but it goes on and on and on forever with no obvious pattern other than the pattern being the digits of pi. Okay, so how do we round? Well, first off, we need to know what we're rounding to. So if I say I want to round to the nearest whole number, so that means that I'm looking at the units decimal place. So I'm looking at the units place here. So that's my place value. And I want to say, okay, what whole number is this number closest to? That's what I'm trying to say. So the easiest way of visualizing this is drawing the number line. Okay, and I just want a number line with whole numbers on it. So let's say this is 1, 2, 3, 4. So where does pi fall on this number line? Well, it would be something like right here. This is pi. Okay, so I'm just going to zoom in for a moment on that, if I can. Let's see here, zooming in. Right, okay, so as you can see, pi is 3.1415926, and it is right there. And the question now is this closer to the 3 or closer to the 4? Now on the number line, it's easy to tell that it's closer to the 3 because that's where I put the arrow. But how did I know to put the arrow there? Well, what you do is you look at the number itself and you say, okay, I'm looking at the nearest whole number, so that's currently a 3. And then you look at the next decimal place. In this case, it's the tenths column. And you see that in this case, it's a 1. So, and the idea here is, if we were to look back at our number line here, the idea is if we are more than halfway towards 4, then we would round to 4. But if we're on the other side of that line, we're rounding down to 3. So, since we are closer to 3, right, how do we know that we're closer to 3? Well, our tenths place is 1, which is less than 5, right? Because this line here, what number is this? This is 3.5. Okay, so what we do, 3.1 rounds down to 3. So to the nearest whole number, pi is approximately 3. What about to the nearest, well, let's try one more. Another simple one, to the nearest tenth. Okay, so make sure that you know the place value names. That's important, so that you can do this. So if we're rounding this to the nearest tenth, then our number line, instead of whole numbers, we're going to look at just numbers to the tenth. So 3.0, 3.1, 3.2, and so on. And pi is between 3.1 and 3.2. It's somewhere around here. This is pi. Okay? Now what's the halfway mark between 3.1 and 3.2? Well, that would be 3.15. Right? So we're looking now, once again, we're looking the next digit over, and the halfway mark is the 5. So if we're above that, we're going to round up. If we're below that, we're going to round down. So pi, in this case, are we going to round up or round down? Well, what we look now is, say, we've got 3.14. I'm comparing that to 3.15. 3.14 is less than it, so we round down. So we round to the nearest tenth. So we make sure that we get the right number of decimal places. There we go, so 3.1. Okay, now when you're rounding, obviously you don't have to draw out this every time, but just for some people they need this little visualization in their head. So this is what you should be thinking about. Okay, now let's try to the nearest, well, tenths, hundredths, thousandths. Let's go to the nearest 10 thousandths.
Actually, no, let's just go to the nearest thousandths. Thousandths. There we go. So what we've got now is 3.1415. 1 is the thousandth, right? So tenths, hundredths, thousandths. So my number line, I'm now really zooming in, and I've got 3.140, 3.141, 3.142, and so on. Okay, and pi is pretty much right smack dab in the middle of 3.141 and 3.142. The question is, what side of the line is it on? Well, the line is 3.1415, right? And so we look and we see, hey, it's 3.1415. That's the next digit. Oh no, do we round up or round down? It's equal, is what that's saying. But it's not actually equal, because if you have this 5 here, the next digit, right, ends up, in this case, being a 9. It doesn't matter if it's a 1 or a 0001 or whatever. It's a little bit more than 3.1415, right? It's actually 3.1415 and then some more fractional bits. So it's actually slightly on the positive side of this line. So it's above this line, or to the right of this line. So that means that it's actually closer to 3.142. Okay, so to the nearest thousandth, pi rounds to 3.142, despite the fact that the actual digits are 3.141, right? Because we end up rounding up. So whenever there's a 5, you round up. Okay, so what are the rules for rounding? Okay, so what we're doing is if the next digit is less than 5, we round down. And if the next digit is greater than or equal to, even if it's equal to 5, you round up. Okay? Remember, round down means digits don't change. And we just cut off the number at wherever it was. And round up means add 1 to the last digit after we cut it off. So we're going to cut it off just like we would before, right? So at when we're rounding to the 10th, we cut it off at 3.1, and we just cut it off, right? Because we rounded down. To the nearest thousandth, we cut it off at 3.141, but then we had to increase the last digit by 1, right? So that's how we round. So yeah, so then, so these are the 2 rules that you need to follow. Okay, I'm going to do one more example, and yeah, it will show what happens if we round and we have to add 1 to the last digit, but that last digit's a 9. So let's try that real quick. So we have to add 1. So let's try 5.9997. Okay, and I want to round to the nearest, let's say, thousandth.
Okay, notice I'm saying thousandth here. If I said round to the nearest thousand, then the answer to this would be 0, right? Because 1,000, that's a big number. Okay, so just be careful with that. So now, rounding to the nearest thousandth, what I'm going to do is I look at the thousandth, okay, space C, okay, that's the 9 there, and then I look at the next digit. All right, that's more than 5, so I have to round up. So I'm going to take the number that I had before and add 1 to the thousandth digit, because I'm rounding up. So that 9 becomes a 10, but that's not a digit anymore. So what happens? Well, so this rounds up to 10, which then the 1 carries over to this 9, which that turns into a 10, which the 1 carries over and turns into a 10 again, and so 5 becomes a 6. So rounding this to the nearest thousandth ends up being 6.000. Okay, and it's tempting to write this as 6, and in some cases that might be fine, but if you want to show that this is rounded to the nearest thousandth, it's actually best just to write 6.000 to show how accurate we're being. All right, so that is how we round when there's carrying over that happens. All right, very good. Okay, so that is rounding done. On to adding, subtracting, multiplying, and dividing with decimals.